Port. Port is a fortified wine. Fortified wines are wines where spirits, usually grape brandy, are incorporated. This addition of alcohol kills the yeast and stops fermentation before all the sugars are gone. The wine then moves to barrels where they are aged up to 40 years. Port was created so that wine could survive long ocean voyages. They can be made with either red or white grapes. Port takes its name from the city Oporto in Portugal, where it has been shipped for a few hundred years. Production occurs over 40 miles downstream from the vineyards in Douro, where there are 3 subregions. The vineyards in Baixo Corgo produce the lightest wine. Cima Corgo is where most of the top vineyards are found, and Douro Superior, while planted more sparingly, is also a source of quality port. Each year, authorities dictate how many grapes may be used for port, with the remainder being turned into still wines. 29 varieties are recommended for use in the production of port. The best known reds are Tinta Roriz, which is the local name for Tempranillo, Touriga Nacional, Touriga Franca, Tinta Sal, and Tinha Barroca. Better known whites are Cercial, Verdelho, Malvasia Fina, and Vio Cinto. There are 4 major categories of port. Ruby port is deep in color, fruity, and ready to drink. It may taste similar to some sweet wines you may have had. These will be labeled Ruby Port, Reserve Ruby Port, Late Bottled Vintage, or Traditional Style LBV. Reserve Ruby Port is a blend of multiple vintages that is aged in cask up to 5 years. A late bottled vintage, or LBV, is made from a specific year's vintage and is aged 4 to 6 years before bottling. Tawny port is a paler, browner, and smoother, with complex nutty aromas. A tawny with indication of age will be labeled either 10, 20, 30, or 40 years. It's important to know that the age stated is not the actual age, but is an average age of the vintages inside. These ports must state the year of bottling. With age, the palate has changed to walnut, almond, caramel, and coffee. Colheita is a rare single vintage port with a minimum requirement of 8 years of aging. Vintage ports are the longest lived of all the port wines and are intended to do most of their aging in the bottle versus the cask. They are bottled between 18 months and 3 years. Any producer can declare a vintage, and the wines will be blends of grapes from their finest vineyards. Single Quinta vintage ports are made from a single top quality vineyard, and the name of the quinta, or estate, appears on the label. It is tradition with some to gift a newborn with a vintage port from his or her birth year to save until adulthood for drinking. White ports are, of course, made with white grapes. They are golden in color and will be off dry to sweet. They will spend 3 to 4 years in cask before bottling. Choose a ruby port to compare with a tawny port for this exercise. This will give you a very good idea of what basic differences there are between the 2 styles. If you know that you already like ruby ports, compare a standard ruby to a late bottled vintage. You may also find it interesting to compare a standard Old World from Portugal to a New World port wine. Australia has some very good examples on the market right now. You may also wish to invite a friend or 2 over to help with your experimentation, but if you don't, it's okay, as they will keep for a while. If you do invite friends, either keep them around for a bit or advise them to bring a designated driver, as the alcohol content in port ranges anywhere between 18 and 20%. If after this exercise you find that you are a fan of port, there is a Port Appreciation Society on Facebook where members can share old favorites and new discoveries. Words or phrases to look for on the label to know you're buying a port. Port, late bottled vintage, colheita. The flavor profile of these wines are, for ruby, red fruit, dark fruit, dried fruit. For tawny, caramel, nuts, vanilla, dried fruit, and my favorite, creme brulee. You can pair these wines, rubies, with desserts or chocolate. In fact, it is one of very few wines that pair well with chocolate. Tawny ports can pair with hard cheese, dried fruits, nuts. My absolute favorite, just have plain unsalted almonds, chocolate, and nutty desserts.